All right, well, I have 10:30, so we will go ahead and start. My name's Robin Donaldson. I'm with Indiana Youth Service Association. Just want to welcome everyone to the call at the webinar this morning. Thank you so much for joining. I'm going to take care of just a few housekeeping items before I turn it over to our presenter. As I said, if you can go ahead and mute your call if you haven't already done so. Then if you have questions, you can unmute to ask those questions. And you can also use that chat feature, and I'll be keeping an eye on the chat box to, if you have questions, um, you can type those in, and if Cecilia doesn't see those, I will make sure that she does see those. As I said, we're recording this, and we'll be posting this on the IYSA YouTube channel. We have if you just go to YouTube and type in Indiana Youth Service Association, then our channel pops up, and there are a couple of different um, links that you can go to. One of those is the training link. So if you have other staff members that you would like, that you think might be interested in this, you can refer them to that later on. And I know that Cecilia also has some handouts. So again, if you guys are interested, I'm going to in getting those handouts. I think I have everyone's email address that's currently on the phone with maybe, Sarah, I'm not sure I have yours. I think I might up in Family Center Services, but if you're interested in getting those handouts, just email me as well, and I'll put my email address in there so everyone has that. But with that, I am going to turn it over to Cecilia Garman. She is the Executive Director at the Youth Service Bureau with the City of Gary, and has kindly offered to do this webinar training for us. So thank you so much, Cecilia, and I'm just going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Robin, and good morning to everyone. Today we are talking about adolescents and runaways. Excuse me, I'm getting over a little cold, a little upper respiratory infection, so I hope that everyone can hear me clearly. One of the biggest questions in youth services is how do we help the kids that seem to stray away or are not necessarily as invested in what we do as we'd like them to be, or even some of the kids that we have worked with who kind of have issues at home. We don't see them as often as we used to, or something has happened in a situation where we know they've changed, or something has become different about them, about their demeanor, about the way they react in relationship with their peers, in relationship with us. There's always a telltale sign. Or even if we have kids who are with us who might have friends who they want to talk about, who they know are in danger or in situations. So today we're going to talk about how to help those kids. What do we do, and how do we help them? Robin, you can advance.
Maybe. There we go.
Okay, so adolescents and runaways. It's estimated that 1 million kids run away each year. Every year, 1 million kids run away from their homes every year. So these are multiple runaways. They're more likely to be female. They're more likely to have school problems, and they're more likely to have high family conflict. So what we're going to see usually in our programs is with the females, they're usually aggressive, and I don't know about you, but for me, I've worked with children for over 20 years, and probably within the last 5, maybe 8 years, these are the most aggressive females that I've seen ever. They have a high rate of aggression, a high rate of anger, a high rate of stress, because there's a difference in the family dynamic, difference in what they experience, a difference even in the world around them and what they deal with socially. So there are a lot of things that they deal with that even our children, maybe even, I'm in the 40-plus age group, some of the things that even my children growing up didn't have to deal with, these children are dealing with that are quite different from what we might consider normal that they see that other kids haven't had to see growing up. More likely to have school problems, mostly because they don't go. We see a lot of labeling in the schools with ADHD, oppositional defiance, just different things that in this day and age of acceptance of psychology and counseling, that we just are really quick to label kids with different types of mental health issues. And I'm not saying that these things don't exist or that they're not true, but we're very quick to put labels on kids. And a lot of times, because they don't want those stigmas attached to them, um, schools usually treat children according to those labels. So when they go to class, they're dealt with not according to who they are, but according to the label. And they have problems in schools because of that. They have problems in school. They're placed in classes according to those labels. So everybody knows the kids in this particular class are those types of kids. So they don't go. They either don't go to that class or they just don't go to school at all. And because of the high rates of aggression, they get put out of class, and therefore they don't get to spend time in an environment that is conducive to education. So they have problems in school. And then they're more likely to have high family conflict because the family dynamic is different. We're in the era of, people like to say babies having babies, but the truth is there are no more kids having kids than there were many years ago. Um, yeah, children do have children, but that didn't just start in this millennium. That didn't just start in the 21st century. Younger people have been having children for many, many years. But it's the climate of the society that we're in that makes a difference in how the family dynamic operates. And a lot of times, children don't have the rearing that they should or that we are accustomed to children having. And they have to see a lot more than they did. They have to do a lot more than they did. They have to fend for themselves a lot more than they did. And there's a very high rate of stress with children, and they don't know how to adapt. And quite frankly, they shouldn't have to know. So that brings high family conflict. Mothers aren't in the home. Fathers aren't in the home. It used to be that we got angry because men aren't in the home. So this is what's missing. But mothers aren't in the home either. I've just read in the news maybe a week ago, if that long, about an 8-year-old kid that went to jail for killing a 3-year-old because the two mothers went out clubbing and they left all the children in the home, and the oldest kid in the house was 8. And the 8-year-old watched all the other kids, and because the 3-year-old was crying, he didn't know what to do. He got angry and frustrated and shook the child to death. So these things are happening. Another case where a mother left her kids to go to work but left them in the house and was doing that quite regularly. And the little boy was outside of his house, and the neighbor just happened to see him, and he said, well, I just came outside because I was hungry. I was trying to see if somebody was outside that I could ask for $1 so I could go get something to eat. He was going to walk up to McDonald's and get $1 sandwich. So it's not just fathers, it's mothers, it's the dynamic of the family. People can't pay for child care, and things are just different in our world today. So these are the types of stress that children are dealing with, and as they get older, they realize that they don't want to live like this, and that it's more difficult for them, and there's stress on the parents because not all of them want to live that way, but some of them feel that they have to, and they take it out on the kids, and then there's the family conflict, so kids run away. You can advance, rather. So there are two different types of runaways. You have intent runaways, those who leave home and intend to stay gone. They're not ever coming back. Those are usually those kids that have been abused sexually, emotionally, physically. They have no intention on ever coming back They want to leave the family. They want to leave the home. They don't want to have anything else to do with their families. And then you have transient runaways, those who will leave and stay gone for a few days, a few hours. They're going to return home, but I'm angry right now and I don't want to deal with the repercussions. So I'm just going to stay gone long enough to get the heat off of me, to get the heat off of them, and then I'll go back home when everybody's calmed down. But both situations are dangerous because of the positions and the situations they have to put themselves in order to survive. Not everyone has a safe place to go when they run away, whether it be an intent runaway or a transient runaway. Most of them do end up having to stay on the street. Sometimes, particularly with transient runaways, they might have a friend or a couple friends who they can crash with, or let me stay with you for a little while until I get myself together and I'm able to go back home. That can only last for so long. But with transient runaways, they're usually repeat offenders. So they can't stay at, a friend's house every time they run away. Eventually, that parent becomes suspicious and wants to talk to mom or wants to talk to dad. So now they've got to find another friend who they can stay at their house. And then they start friend hopping so that they can have somewhere to stay because they're repeat offenders. They run away often because there's always conflict and they need to leave even though they have the intention to go back. But sometimes they don't have those friends and they do end up staying on the street and they do put themselves in dangerous situations and it's not safe. We can advance. Why adolescents run? Um, Divorce and death are kind of the same thing. It's a grieving process because kids who have grown up in the home together with both parents, a divorce is a type of death. It is the end of a relationship. It's the end of something as you knew it. So when divorce happens, a lot of times parents are very busy looking at how it affects them because it is their relationship, but they spend not as much time looking at how it affects their children. I know today most courts, particularly if there are children involved, require the entire family to go through counseling before divorce is granted. I know that's true in Illinois. I don't know how true it is here in Indiana. But in Illinois, you have to go through family court, and before divorce is granted, the children have to go through counseling to make sure that they're okay, to make sure they understand what's happening, and to make sure that the parents know how the children feel before divorce is granted. Death of a parent, a sibling, a close relative, a grandparent, a friend, even a pet can affect children very harshly. And it's difficult to know how that child is going to feel depending on that particular person. Um, Children take things personal, and a lot of times we don't realize how personal they take those things. It can be years later that they'll be adults maybe before you find out how they actually felt about a particular event, something that may have happened when they were very small, and you might be sitting around Thanksgiving table dinner one day when they're 20, 25 years old, and you find out how they really felt. So we just have to be very mindful that these things do affect children. And even though they're resilient, they bounce back, they continue to go on. But inside, internally, we have to make sure that we know how they're really feeling. Sexual orientation is difficult for children, especially when they are confused or they're searching or questioning how they feel sexually. It's a little different now because we're not as closed-minded as we were maybe, say, 5, even 10 years ago about sexual orientation, but there is still a very big stigma and not as much acceptance as maybe people would like for there to be about sexual orientation. So it can be difficult sometimes for kids to accept who they are as far as what their preferences are. and particularly if it's in the home. We see this a lot when it is a very highly religious area or background in the home. If the parents are very stringent, morally, religious wise, they're Christian or Muslim or any type of highly stringent or dogmatic religion, um, that kid is going to have a very hard time convincing their parents or even talking to their parents about why it's okay for them to be the way that they are. Um, Defiant adolescents run simply because they don't want to follow the rules. That they just have it in their minds that whatever it is they want to do, they should be able to do. Regardless of what the rules are. The rules don't necessarily have to be wrong. We've talked a lot about when there are things wrong in the home, but sometimes there's just a thing wrong in that kid that says, I don't want to obey the rules. I don't want to do what I'm supposed to do. I don't think I should have to. And they don't, so they run. When there's sexual, emotional abuse by a parent, a relative, or a close family friend, kids will run. It's very difficult to face the reality of being abused by someone who's supposed to protect you. That's a very difficult thing to reconcile within yourself as an adult, let alone as a child, when someone who is supposed to be protective of you and keep you from harm is the one that's harming you. And often it's difficult to talk to someone about that or even admit it to yourself. And kids will run. And in those situations, when they do run, um, they don't find solace even in running because there's still that psychological aspect of what has happened to them that they have to deal with. And when they leave home, they still carry the stigma of that abuse with them. When there's physical abuse by parents, kids become very aggressive and they take that with them as well. When they run, they often become aggressive on the street. They become aggressive in school. They become aggressive with their peers. And that often looks like bullying. When they go home, when they're at school, when they're in other situations, and when they've been bullied, it's very difficult even to talk with a kid who has been physically abused to try to understand, even once they have become bullies, it's kind of hard for you to get it out of them that that's what has happened. Often, if you dig deep enough, talking to a bully and trying to figure out where it's coming from, somewhere, somewhere deep down in there, they've been abused by someone. It may not have been at home. Oftentimes it is, but somewhere they've most likely been abused. 73% of female homeless and runaways were sexually abused, as opposed to 38% of males who were abused at home. So most of those girls who were abused, who run, were abused. 73% of them, as opposed to 38%. So sexual abuse makes females a higher category of runaways than their male counterparts, although males do get abused. But males are more prone to deal with abuse in ways of aggression, more so than running away. Yet they do run away as a result of being abused. But they're more prone to stay at home. They just become aggressive. Girls become aggressive as well, but they will run away from the situation to stop the abuse. We can advance slide. Parent substance abuse is another reason why adolescents run. Um, Sometimes they become very despondent about trying to help their parents and even cover it up from family members, from friends. This happens usually in the early teens, early to middle teenage years when kids become sociable. They start wanting to bring friends home or people start coming around and they become embarrassed about the situation in the home and this begins to make them angry and resentful because the parent is either always inebriated or does things that become very embarrassing, and they run away. Parents with mental illness is another reason that kids run, because they don't know how to deal with the mental illness. And parents can be abusive as a result of having mental illness issues. And that is usually, the kids are usually the object of their abuse in those situations. If the child is mentally ill, they will run. If they're not being properly treated, um, that happens. When a parent is suffering a health challenge, kids who are afraid to see what the end result is going to be often fear is a situation for kids to run, because they don't know how to handle the challenge of what is happening to their parent. And also, if there are other people in the home that are helping to take care of that parent, sometimes there is a new expectation of the child that they don't necessarily like as a result of the parent being sick. Maybe another relative, the parent's siblings, or maybe even the parent's parents have moved into the home to help care for them, and there's a changing of the guard, and the child is having difficulty dealing with that, and they leave. Financial struggles in the home, when there is a problem with money flowing through the house. Sometimes kids even feel that they're doing their parents a favor when they leave, when there are financial struggles, because they feel like there's one less mouth to feed, uh, one less set of feet to put shoes on, one less back in the house to clothe, and they think, I'm doing my parents a favor if I leave, because they don't have to worry about taking care of me. And then if they're disallowed in the family home for whatever reason, if they've become disobedient, or something has happened where they're not allowed to come back into the home. So 77% of runaways have been asked to leave their homes. Those that have been disallowed in the home, 77% of them have been asked to leave their homes because of reasons of abuse of another child in the home. Sometimes we have sexual deviant kids who are sexual deviant, who have either been abused or have seen abuse, who become abusers themselves. So now they have siblings in the home, or there are other children in the home, relatives who the parents might be taking care of, and they've become abusive to those children. Or the child has threatened a parent. There have been cases where a child has even sexually abused their own parent, or the child refuses treatment for their own mental illness, which is hard to control. There was a case here where a child was mentally ill and sexually abused his mother. We also had a kid, actually in my program, who had suicidal ideation and was making posts on Facebook about wanting to kill himself. And one of the young ladies here actually pulled up a Facebook post. She came in my office and asked me, could she show me something? And he had a picture on Facebook with a gun to his head, and had a very poignant post about, not wanting to be here anymore. So I had to actually call it. We have a therapist that we have a memorandum of understanding with. We work closely with some other resources in the city that help some of our families. We created this crisis recovery and response unit where some of the agencies here will help our families and our kids with certain services at a discounted rate. And he was one of the kids that was working with a therapist. And when I called her, we called the police and had him taken to the hospital. I rode with him to the hospital so that he could be evaluated. He was placed on a 72-hour hold. So a lot of times you have kids who suffer from mental illness, and his father was not just not willing to accept that there was anything wrong with him. I mean, totally alpha male, and just would not accept that this kid had a problem. But gratefully, it did take that for him to finally realize we need to go ahead and evaluate him so he can get some help, and he did.
Cecilia, do you see the question from Christina?
Yes, I do now. What types of specific mental disorders of youth do you see commonly leading to running away? Um, Mostly with mental health disorders specifically. I see post-traumatic stress disorder being one of the biggest things that lead to kids running away because there has been some underlying issue that has not been dealt with, and that causes them to leave. Usually there has been a stressful situation. There's been some kind of event that has gone on that either has not been discussed or has not been properly dealt with. It's either been discussed or it hasn't been dealt with. We had a kid who had told at least 3 adults. She told her teacher, she told her counselor, and she told DCFS that her mother's paramour was molesting her. No one would listen. They even went, they investigated. Her mother called her a liar, said that she was just a little fast girl and wanted attention. They finally took her out of the home when she and her mother had this same strain of an STD. That was the only way that they could, okay, now we believe you, because unless your mother had sex with you, the only way we know that you both could have it is if you both had sex with the same person. So those are the kind of situations that we're seeing, and that is what these kids are going through. So post-traumatic stress disorder, I would say, is probably the most common mental health disorder that causes kids to run away because their issue, their main event, the underlying issue, hasn't been dealt with properly. Okay, so what happens when kids run away? What happens as a result of, or what happens once they run away? There's truancy, suspension, and expulsion, and this for obvious reasons, because they're not going to school. They drop out, once again, obviously, because they're not going to school. They suffer from low self-esteem because they remove themselves from the most of society, and you're welcome, Christina. They remove themselves. Their friends, they stop talking. They've isolated. They become depressed because they feel like they don't have anyone. And they become part of a new society. Um, Kids that run away put themselves in a different category than kids who have a home to go to. Even those kids who we talked about before, the two different types of kids, even transient runaways, the ones who do return home, they still make a difference out of themselves. I'm not like the rest of the kids. I'm not like everybody else, even when they go back home, because they identify with having to fend for themselves, and they identify with having to be in a different place other than home and not knowing the safety of home. They have suicidal ideation because now I'm at a place where I don't know if it's even worth being here. If I have to go through all of this and have this to look forward to, then why should I be here? And these are the things we want to help them to get through. We can advance. What happens on the street? Girls are more likely molested and used for sex trafficking, which is a big deal now, and a very big deal in Indiana. I wish I could say that it wasn't, but it is. Sex trafficking is very popular here, and girls are being used to solicit sexual favors in on a small scale and a grand scale. There are sex rings in high schools. There's an app, I don't know what it's called, but if you look at a phone and you see an icon that looks like a calculator or a message app, don't always think that that's what it is. There are these sex apps that look like calculators or message apps, but when you hold them down, they're actually sex trading apps where you can take pictures of yourself, naked pictures, and they're kind of like, there's this app called Snapchat where pictures or the Snapchat only stays on for a certain amount of seconds. So if you want to share these naked pictures, they only stay there for so long. So it kind of really, if somebody catches you, kind of like not there for very long. So if somebody were to actually get a hold of your phone and look at it, it might not be there. And these kids are doing this and sharing them, and it's another way for predators to look at naked kids. There's a school, and I'm not sure, you can look it up. It's on the internet. I can't remember exactly where it is. There's an entire school that shut down because of this going through the whole school. Just went rampant. And they're talking about prosecuting those kids who are over 16 and making them register as sex offenders because the entire school was doing this. So these are the things that our kids are faced with. You know, it used to be you had to go and look high and low for a Playboy magazine or a Hustler magazine or something that was going to show you naked pictures. Now all these kids have to do is go on the internet. And they don't have to look very far. All they have to do is take pictures and send them in an email, send them in a Snapchat, send them, you know, any kind of way they need to. It's just so easily accessible. And we're going to talk about that more a little later, about how easy it is to do this because of marketing and media and the society we live in makes it so acceptable for you to just be naked and it's okay. So these things become more normalized to our kids that, you know, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing indecent about not being clothed, about being sexual, about being in touch with who you are and showing your parts, and there's nothing wrong with it. But we have to get back into the habit of teaching these things, even if they don't learn it at home, because they're certainly not going to learn it in the media or on television or anywhere else for that matter, because it's so highly acceptable to just be free. And sex trafficking is not a bad word anymore. There are prostitution rings in schools. There are young girls who are pimps in school. They have sex rings. And again, the girls now are quite different from the girls of 5, 10 years ago. It's not the boys that are doing this. It's the girls. The girls are pimping other girls. The girls are telling other girls what to do and how to make money and how to do what they need to do to survive and these kind of things. So boys are more likely to get robbed and pulled into gang activity and drug trafficking. So the gangs are grooming the boys to do things, to rob, to sell drugs, and to be in those kind of situations. Not even so much for sexual activity, but just to keep the drugs on the street and to manufacture drugs. There are a lot more synthetic drugs on the street and a lot more houses that are set up to create these drugs that that were not before. You have a lot more what they call street pharmacists that are making these drugs and putting all sorts of stuff in pills and incorporating them with marijuana, incorporating them with cocaine, and selling them to other children, not just adults, but to other children. And these are the things that boys are getting pulled into. And then they become criminals for survival. So they sell drugs, they sell sex, and then they steal and they shoplift and they rob. Kids will go in the store. There is I believe it's on YouTube. There's a video that shows these kids walking in stores, and it just basically shows how they just walk through stores and grab stuff. I don't know who it is filming them, a friend of theirs, I'm sure, but they just go through stores and just show how easy it is to pick stuff up and stick it in your pocket. So this is what they do so they can stay on the street. Most of the time is if they go in grocery stores, obviously they take things that they can eat so that they can survive. But a lot of stuff they take so they can fence it and get money so they can survive. We can go to the next one.
Oop.
Communication and listening. So, okay, what happens on the street? Many use survival sex, where they trade sex for food and shelter. There are predators on the street who hang around areas in bigger cities, particularly in Chicago, and I speak of that because I know Chicago well. There are certain areas in Chicago, mostly on the west side. The north side is a predominantly wealthy area, but there are certain parts of the north side, especially around the Boys Town, where and some areas in upper north side where there is known homosexual activity. There are areas where men know that runaways frequent, and they go there and kind of camp out and wait to see who they can find so they can trade money for sex. Or they'll take kids and I'll take you and get you something to eat, or I'll take you and buy you something, or even take them home, let them spend the night if you give me sex. And a lot of times these kids, most of the time, these kids go for it. And this is common. This isn't something that just happens every now and then. It's happening all day, every day, in various areas of most major cities all the time. They're at high risk for STDs, obviously, because they're having sex. Very seldom are they practicing safe sex. What is even more frightening is, you consider the idea that these kids may not be at their most brightest time of life. But here you've got adults who are just really performing these risky behaviors with these kids. They're not very, very bright either, apparently. But they're not using condoms. They're not using them. Most kids that have engaged in these activities, when you talk to them, most of them have said that they did not use condoms and that they were not safe. They're at high risk for suicide because, again, post-traumatic stress disorder, after you've done these things for so long, it weighs heavily on you because this is not the life that you plan to live. It's not what you wanted to do. It's what you feel you have to do in order to survive. And it's not something that you were prepared for. No one, an adult, is not prepared for this kind of lifestyle, certainly not a child. They're at high risk for mental illness, such as post-traumatic stress disorder. They do become oppositionally defiant. They can become depressed. They will oftentimes develop certain mental health disorders as a result of having been on the street and as a result of using drugs and alcohol to cope with their situation. A lot of them feel that they can deaden the pain of the situation of why they left home in the first place and the situation that they've currently put themselves in. and they use drugs and alcohol as escapism so they can continue to live in that type of situation. So, runaway prevention, let's talk. This is a curriculum that you can get from the National Runaway Switchboard. And we're going to talk just a little bit about some of the things that are entailed in it. We're going to speak from the perspective they have is how you would teach a potential runaway that would come to you. I'm going to speak to you about how we would train each other or how we communicate with each other about how to speak to a potential runaway, especially when we come from such various and diverse areas of the state, because we don't all just have one type or one set of kids, and also various different age groups of kids because they have different problems. And especially when they are in different types of areas of their lives. You have smaller kids who some say, oh, well, you're 8 years old. Why would you ever want to run away? You'd be surprised why an 8-year-old would want to run away. And some of them do. They may not have the same problems as a 13-year-old, but then again, they might, depending on the situation at home or at school. And it's not always at home, and it's not always at school. So we just really have to learn to listen to these kids and figure out what it is that's going on with them, and not just blow them off as, oh, this is just a kid, which often happens, and then it's too late because they've already run. So communication and listening. There's the good listener and the bad listener. There's the active listener, and then we have to learn to communicate during a crisis. We have to learn to problem solve, and we have to be critical thinkers. So the good listener has eye contact, and the good listener lets the speaker know that they're paying attention by nodding and saying yes or okay while the speaker is talking. The bad listener jumps in while the speaker is talking, or finishes their sentence, or just waits for their turn to talk. And a lot of times as youth service workers, we want to help, and we might think that we know what it is we need to say or what they need to hear. So instead of listening, we're looking for our opportunity to guide them. And that's not always what they need. So an active listener is always quiet, listen, and is able to repeat back to them what they've said. So once the speaker has gotten through talking, the active listener can repeat back and say, so what I've understood you to say is, or so what you're telling is this. And that lets them know that you've heard them, and it also gives them an opportunity to hear back what they've said. And it makes both of you accountable for understanding the context of the conversation. When we're communicating during a crisis, if there's something actual going on, a kid comes in to you, they've just gone through an event, they're in a crisis, they're upset, we have to be calm, and we have to be able not to get upset with them or not to react. A lot of times, especially if it's a kid that you're extremely fond of, or if it's a kid that you're not extremely fond of, we have to not react. I teach something to my staff. We have to respond and not react. When we react, we're emotional. When we respond, we're critical. So we don't want to be emotional because we can't operate out of emotions. Emotions are subject to change all the time. So we can't react. When we respond, we're critical. And when you respond, you're able to think well, and you're able to be positive. So in order for us to respond, I have to take time to hear what's going on, and I have to be able to de-escalate you so that you can talk to me in a way that I can help you. And in order for me to do that, I can't react to you. I have to respond to you. So communicating during a crisis means that I have to remain level-headed and try to de-escalate you in the crisis as well. And this is part of problem solving because everybody around usually becomes agitated when there is a problem, especially in a crisis. So when something's going on, you can't fall into the crisis. You can't get into a situation where you become part of the problem as well because information gets tainted and distorted when people are upset, and cooler heads need to prevail so the chaos can dissipate. And then we have to be critical thinkers. When a kid is telling you something, make sure you're getting the full gist of the conversation. We all know there's three sides to every story. There's his side, her side, and then there's the truth. So because you have one side of the story most times, and if there is in fact both parties there and you do get two sides of the story, you have to be a critical thinker and know how to navigate through the situation so that you can hear the truth that's weaving through both sides of those stories. But if a kid is coming to you about a situation that happened at school or at home, we have to be critical thinkers and figure out what's the best way to deal with this. A kid comes to you and says, my mother beat me last night. Well, we really have to think critically about that. What is your definition of beat me? And what side of the fence are you on about corporal punishment? And do you allow your personal opinion to weigh heavily on how you deal with what this kid just told you? And what do you do with this information? And do you call DCFS? Do you make the hotline call? Or do you talk to this child about what they did? Or do you talk to the parent? You got a lot of critical thinking to do. So we have to really understand the veracity of the situation and try to figure out where do I fall in this equation, and is this kid really saying something that I need to put all my effort into, or is this something that I need to try to de-escalate without getting into a crisis? Is this something that I need to try to talk to the child about and put them at ease, or do I really need to get more people involved and try to make something happen? So personal influences and peers, relationships that they're in, are they healthy? Are they toxic? Who's on your bus? And the cliques and crowds you're around. Two things that are very key about relationships that we talk to our kids about. You are who you associate with, and association brings about assimilation. So the relationships that you're in, we want to teach them how to identify the role of influence and how it affects their decision making, and the personal values and principles on how they impact their decision making process and the people that are around them. Are you in healthy relationships? The friends you're around. Notice how you respond and react in situations when you are around them and when you're not. Pay attention to the things that you do, the ways that you think, and how you behave when you're with them. Are your grades better when you're in relationship with these people? Do you have more peaceful times? Are you happier when you're around them? Not do you have more pleasure, not do you have more fun, but are you happier? And help them identify the difference. Pleasure doesn't always mean happiness. You can have pleasure and not be happy. So we have to help them understand just because you're having fun doesn't mean you're happy. In these relationships, could they be toxic? Could you have friends that lead you down the wrong path? Are you doing things that make you feel guilty? Are you doing things that could possibly put you at risk? Are you in situations where you have to cover up, you have to lie, you have to hide? You have to be careful. You have to be cautious. You're afraid to tell your other friends. You've left old friends for these friends. What exactly is the standard of relationship for you? And how do you feel when you're around these people? Have you noticed a change in you? Have you changed the way you dress? Have you changed the way you wear your hair? Have you changed anything about yourself in order to fit in with this group of people? Are these healthy relationships or toxic? And has this impacted your family relationships or relationships with your other friends? Who's on your bus? Who are the people of influence in your life? Who are the mentors in your life? Who are the people that you care about? Who are the people that care about you? Who are the people that are in your life that you know love you? Who's on your bus? And those are people that not necessarily people that are in your family. And this is the biggest thing that we want them to understand, um, especially teenagers. Sometimes they're not willing to open up as much to people that are outside of the family dynamic, which is okay. But sometimes maybe a mentor that, especially because we're peer workers, we work with you, maybe you need a mentor that is not necessarily in your family because maybe it's the family that is causing you the distress. So helping them become accustomed to finding a mentor or someone, if that is a problem, that can help them navigate through the times in their life that are causing them stress, so that they can kind of figure out what things they need to help them make better decisions.
Oops.
So family matters. Excuse me. Roles and responsibilities, family talk, and communication tips. So, how to improve communication in the family and resolve conflict can be a little difficult, especially when you're not sure how that family operates. And trying to be a catalyst for change with that family can be a little tricky. And maybe dealing with the family as a whole. I don't know how you all do with your groups, but as I mentioned before, we have a crisis response and recovery unit where we don't just work with our young people, we work with their families as well. So if there's a problem addressed, um, we have things where we do incident reports on our kids, and if I see something come across my desk with a particular kid that um, that I see something repeatedly. I have an incident report on a particular kid repeatedly. Okay, the second time, here's another incident report on this kid. By the third time, I'm going to talk to a parent. I've got to call mom, got to call dad. We need to talk because there's something going on with your son, with your daughter, that we are constantly having to deal with your child. Um, there used to be a strong sense of suspending kids in this program prior to um, me coming here. And whenever they couldn't deal with a kid, they just sent them home, for a week or whatever. And I'm totally against putting kids out of programs. I'm not a big fan of suspending kids from school even, especially without trying to figure out what the problem is. So what we try to do is get the family involved so we can see how can we help change the behavior. Because I don't think kids, especially when they like coming somewhere, purposely come somewhere to get put out. I just don't believe that. I could be wrong, but I just don't believe that. But most of the time, there's something going on with that kid. And I'd say a good 95% of the time, the parents aren't aware. So including the family in the situation and making the dots connect so that everybody that is in this kid's life gets involved. Because I'm sure if they're acting out here, if they're coming to me after school and acting out, they didn't just start that when they got here. They've been acting out at school too. So once we get that connection and we find out from the school, we talk to the school, we get the parents involved. Oh yeah, come to find out they've been sending notes home from school too. The kid hasn't been taking the notes home. They've had detention at school, or the teachers have been talking to them, and they just haven't been responding. So we try to work with the kids to modify the behavior. We do behavior analysis and try to figure out what can we do to help the kid get back on track, what's going on. So get the family involved. Um, Family talk, the roles and responsibilities of the family. Let's find out who is responsible for what. Is there a mother? Is there a father? Is there an older sibling? Is there an aunt, a grandmother? Who's raising this kid? Is there a guardian? Is mom even in the kid's life? Is dad in the kid's life? Are they being raised by a grandparent? Are they in um, abilities of the member? Mom works the night shift. Who's taking if dad's not in the home, or if he is in the home, does he have a responsibility in the family dynamic? He may not necessarily be in the home, but is he involved? And what is his responsibility? So let's connect all the dots and see who's who, and let's get all the wheels running together. And then family talk is the T is for timing, A is for assertive communication, L is for location, and K is for know what to say. So if you have an older kid, this is more so for a teenager, trying to help them know how to communicate to their family what their issue is, whatever it is. Teach them timing. Choose an appropriate time to talk to your family. Set aside a good time and enough time to talk to your family and let them know what's going on with you. If you need to take a trusted friend or mentor with you that you think will help make you more comfortable talking to your family, or take them somewhere that is neutral. If you don't want to take them, if you don't want to go home, is there somewhere, a neutral place that you can go that you would feel more comfortable? Choose the right timing to talk to your family. Assertive communication. Clearly tell your family how you feel. Be honest and direct, but maintain respect with them. Don't expect them to read your mind. So be assertive in your communication, but be respectful about what you have to say, about your feelings. Um, the location, choose a quiet place where you and your family are overheard. Don't go to a restaurant and decide to make this big reveal and put them in a compromising position where they can't respond, or where they can't say, we go somewhere that's quiet and where you won't be uh, overheard, so no one feels like they have to be secretive, but everybody's comfortable being able to say what they have to say, and then know what you want to say. Think about what you want to say ahead of time. Sort out your feelings. Maybe talk over your thoughts with that trusted mentor or another family member before you have the conversation. And then help them to understand, to be realistic about their expectations and requests. Ask for input from the family members and be willing to compromise. Have patience about what's going on. Um, know that Rome wasn't built in a day. Don't expect, just because you've been honest, that everybody's going to jump on board and change. But just wait for change to implement itself, and just know that you told your truth, and then try to let people go through what they need to go through to adjust. But be patient. Have some patience. Okay, we can go to the next one. Um, Runaway reality. So there's a runaway quiz that we will send to you if you ask for it, that you can give to your kids if they ever talk to you about the idea of running away, or if you suspect that they might be trying to run away. There are 10 questions to ask them before, or for them to ask themselves before they run away, and then things to do instead of running away. So this is something that you want to do, to put questions to young people before they run away, and help them to generate other options besides running away. Nothing that you're going to just come up with and tell them to do, but these are things you want them to think of to do. So most of the things that they're going to think of that they can do instead of running away will involve options that are feasible for them. But the 10 questions that they can ask themselves are these, and I can also have these to you if you ask for them. What else can I do to improve my home situation before I leave? The first question they can ask themselves before they run away. Is there something I can do? What would make me stay at home? Is there anything that can be done that would make me stay at home? How will I survive on my own? What means do I have to live on the street? What makes running away unsafe? Makes them think about it. What can happen to me when I go on the street? What will be my demise? What would be my plight if I run away? Who can I count on to help me? If I run away, who can I go to? Who's going to help me? Am I being realistic? Not just about running away, but about the situation that I'm running from. Is it really worth me running away? Do I have a plan that is well thought out? I've packed my bags, I'm getting ready to leave, but do I really know what I'm doing? What are my other options? Is there anything way? Can I go? Is there something else I can do besides running away? Can I talk to my mom? Can we sit down and try to make something better about our situation? If I end up in trouble, who will I call? If something happens to me on the street, do I have any option or any recourse of a person who can help me get out of trouble? And if I return home, what may happen? Do I even have the option to come back? Or do I have one of those parents that say, if you leave, don't come back? So those are 10 questions they need to ask themselves before they run away. And they need to go over those questions with someone they trust, preferably you, someone who can help them navigate through these questions and bring them to a resolve so that they can think about what it is they're actually doing. Because a lot of times kids get, and we do too, get so in our heads about what we're trying to get away from that we haven't thought about once we get away from it, what are we facing? And then you go over with them, what can you do instead of running away? What are the things that I can do instead of running away? This is for you to open up a discussion with them and help them find alternatives to running away. Even if it means leaving the home, it doesn't have to mean running away. Ultimately, we want the family to stay together, but realistically, that's not always what's best. I mean, if there's abuse or if it is a stressful atmosphere, the parents on drugs or the conditions are impoverished or something like that, we obviously want the child to remove themselves from danger, just not place themselves in even more danger by running away. So encourage them to talk to a relative, talk to a trusted school official, reconcile with the family. However, help them come up with these ideas. Don't do it for them because everybody's options are different. You know, you might have one kid who has several family members, another kid who the family just moved to town, they have no family members. So help them come up with, help them think of options on their own that are conducive to their particular situation. Next slide. Community response and responsibility. So who is connected to you? Community roles and responsibilities. What can I do for my community? What can I do to help? What does the community have to offer? And safe places and resources. So we need to find out, each of us, that work with you, we need to find out who is connected to us. We need to find out who in our cities, who in our towns are connected to us as far as what we do in youth services. Who can we talk to when we find out a kid has either run away or is thinking of running away? And then the community roles and responsibilities. What roles do the companies play or the organizations play, and what are their responsibilities, and what do they do in terms of helping kids and doing what they do in the community to provide resources? If a kid runs away, do they provide food? Will they help? Will any of the neighborhood restaurants, will they feed kids? Will they give free coffee? Will they give free donuts? Will they give a meal a day? What are their roles and responsibilities? What can I do for my community? How can I service the community as a youth service worker? What do I do in order to help my community in terms of runaways? These are personal things that we have to think about as youth service workers. Is there anything that I can do personally, individually, and as an organization, anything that I can do to help service runaways, and not just the runaways, but their families? How can I talk to them? How can I help connect them? What is it that I can do for runaways and their families? What can I do to help? How can I make the connection? How can I help facilitate some type of change so that either they don't run away, or if they do, I can try to connect them with the help that they need? And then what does my community already have to offer? Are there any safe places? Do I know where to send runaways? If someone that I know does actually run away, do I know where to send them? If there are resources in my community, do I know where they are and what they are? Do I have any idea um, what to do? I know that I just talked to Robin today, and there are some things that we have available that I'm familiar with, but I don't know enough about. And I'm looking forward to being able to find out some more about one of the places we have here in Gary this evening, so that we can make some better connections for runaways. So we have to get out there and find out what it is that we can do. Now, with this booklet, you're going to be asking these questions if any of you decide to get it. And you can go online. Once we get through with this, I'll give you the information. And these questions will be directed at your kids. These are the questions you will be asking the kids you service. But this whole thing, will give you the opportunity to talk to your kids, the kids you serve, and it has so many resources in here about what you can do as a in terms of runaways and how to help, and what you can do personally, and how to direct someone thinking about running away, and how to help even the other youth that you work with help with runaway prevention. And next slide. Drugs and alcohol. This is a very big piece in runaway prevention, because what we find is a lot of our kids are under the influence of drugs and alcohol. I should have included drugs, tobacco, and alcohol, because cigars, is more than cigarettes even, has become very popular in our culture now. Um, Hip hop culture has made cigars very, very attractive. Um, Movies, music, television, advertising, all these things have made it very appropriate and normalized. Um, Drinking, smoking, you're watching your favorite show, you see your favorite characters having a glass of wine or talking casually, looking for a specific drink or smoking cigars seems harmless, but it becomes a constant in the things we enjoy seeing. So it presents a sense of normalcy in our day-to-day lives that makes it seem okay. And when kids watch this, it just looks like this is what you're supposed to do. It's okay to do. Everybody does it. It's nothing that's abnormal. And these people work every day. These people are all right. There's nothing wrong with them. They're not combative. They're not degenerates to society. They work and they're responsible. So there's nothing wrong with it. And it becomes very, very normal to them. It becomes very, very acceptable to them. So there's no sense of repercussion behind it. There's no sense of addiction behind it. There's no sense of consequence behind it. And when they start doing it, they don't see what happens as a result of repetitive behavior. They just see what these shows want you to see. Um, I watched this show, Being Mary Jane, and the last episode, um, well, the character overall um, drinks wine a lot. There's another show that I watched, Scandal. She drinks wine all the time, but she's a mover and a shaker. So the average kid watching that show is going to think, you know, you can drink a glass of wine all the time and it's okay, still get your job done. This Being Mary Jane show. At the end of the show, she's sitting in her lavish home at her lavish pool, having a glass of wine and smoking a cigar, looking very pretty. So the average girl is going to see that and say, hey, I could do that. So we look at these characters that we look up to and that we admire for whatever reason, and a lot of times we confuse fantasy with reality. And if there's no one in the home teaching these children, that's not real life, which most of the time it's not, because sadly, some of these parents watching these shows fall into the myth that it's real just as well. These kids don't stand a chance. So advertising gets them into the idea that this is what you should do. Peer pressure, parents and their addiction, parenting versus friendships. So kids use drugs and alcohol and tobacco a lot of times out of curiosity, for the pleasure of getting high, um, for relaxation, escapism, trying to run away from the things that they're going through, to relieve stress and anxiety about the things that they're going through, to rebel against their parents, rebel against school, rebel against what they've been taught. As we said, the pressure from their peers, pressure from their families to be sociable around the friends that they've chosen to hang around, and because they're addicted. And usually they become addicted because they've decided to use as a result of being pressured by advertising, music, movies, and television. So when kids see their parents use, they repeat their behavior, parents and their addiction. When you grow up in a household or a family full of addicts, and they don't, when we use the word addicts, we don't necessarily mean, just falling out drunk. I grew up in a family full of functional addicts, people who would drink all day, every day, and still get up and go to work every day. You would never know that they were drunks if you weren't around them all the time. Kept jobs, kept homes, kept lavish cars, did everything they were supposed to do, but chronic alcoholics. So these are the behaviors that kids see. They grow up around it, and if they don't have interventions or something positive in their lives to keep them from falling into the same thing, they are most definitely going to, because it becomes a sense of normalcy to them. So when they see parents doing these things, it in no way represents to them a no-no, because, hey, mommy does it, there can't be anything wrong with it. Daddy does it, there can't be anything wrong with it. And then even when it's on a negative end, a lot of times kids do things even against their own will. I've grown up with people who have said all their lives, I will never take a drink. I see what it did to my mother. I see what it did to my father. And I've seen them years later, and lo and behold, they've fallen into the same trap. So we are responsible for helping them save them from themselves. Sometimes for being that constant that will help remind them that these things aren't appropriate when no one else in their lives will do that for them. Um, I just don't want to give all the credit to Boys and Girls Clubs. You hear it all the time. Boys and Girls Clubs saved my life. I'm ready for some testimonies about the Youth Service Bureau saved my life, because I had some people there that told me that I was better than this, that I was able to do it, that I was able to have a better life, and I did. Because we are sometimes the only constant that they have in their lives. Sometimes we are the only thing that they have to look forward to that's going to be positive in their lives, or one of the only things. And if we can't be constant and consistent in helping them do what's best for them, sometimes they will fall right into a pattern that's just set before them. And parenting versus friendship. Um, it sad to say, a lot of times parents want to be friends instead of parents. They don't chastise their kids for using drugs, tobacco, and alcohol because they want to be friends and don't want to parent. They even rationalize that it would be better for the child to do these things at home as opposed to doing it in the streets. And this can become a double-edged sword, because when the kid becomes oppositional and is under the influence of substances, then the parent wants to put them out of the home because the child is uncontrollable. So a lot of times you hear, oh, well, my mom lets me smoke in the house, or my mom lets me drink at home. And we're talking about kids, underage kids. You shouldn't be smoking or drinking anywhere, much less at home. But again, the parents rationalize that it's okay because they're at home, and I'd rather them do it at home than in the street if they're going to do it. And this can be the catalyst for a kid eventually running away, because kids need structure. I don't care how much they say they don't. They do, and they want it. And when they don't have it, they might like it for a little while, but contrary to popular belief, kids want structure. They want to be parented. They want to be raised. And when they're not, they miss it. And it's very hard for kids to have any respect in an area where they feel like they're not being properly raised. The next slide.
Cecilia, we're
Anchor.
getting close to time, our time limit too. So just I don't know how many more of the slides we have.
Okay, I think there's three more.
Okay.
Okay. Anger and stress management, defining and dealing with anger, what to do with anger, triggers, different types of anger and how to deal with anger, defining and identifying stress and ways to reduce stress. Um, there are three different components to stress. I'll go through these really quickly. There's the physical reaction, which starts with a rush of adrenaline and an increased heart rate. It sometimes escalates to the fight or flight response. And then there's the cognitive experience of anger, which is how we perceive or think about what is making us angry. For example, if we might think that something that has happened to us is wrong or unfair or undeserved, that's our cognitive reaction to anger. And then it's how we express our anger. It comes in a wide range of behavior that signals anger. It's how we look and sound when we're angry. We may turn red or raise our voices, clam up, slam doors, break things, or storm away. And it's how others see us when we get angry. And then our triggers to anger is how people treat us, or what someone does to us, or what someone says to us. And these are things that make kids angry. We have to help them identify those things that make them angry, the different types of anger, and how to deal with their anger and what to do with that anger. We have to help them understand that, so that they always know in any situation, instead of blowing up or getting upset, how to deal with their anger, because sometimes the reasons why they want to run away and they become so angry, they can actually deal with it as opposed to just leaving. And if we help them and show them, give them the tools to deal with the anger, we can kind of alleviate some of the desire to leave home. Uh, Stress is it happens when we feel we cannot cope with the circumstances or our environment. It's caused primarily by two things: whether you think the situation around you is worthy of anxiety and how your body reacts to that thought process. Um, and we have to figure out what to do with that stress, how to reduce that stress. And the trigger of stress is usually fear. Fear, we're afraid what's going to happen if this, I don't know what's going to happen. So I'm fearful of this situation. And if we teach kids how to deal with stress and how to deal with anger properly, we can alleviate a lot of their problems, or at least try to help them alleviate a lot of their problems. So teens plus stress plus resources equals a crisis averted. So if we give teens who experience stress and anger the proper resources, we can avert a lot of crises. So if we just help them navigate through these things, um, a lot of the desires to run away often can be avoided. Sexuality and sexual orientation, this will probably take much longer. So I can even send this to each of you, this particular slide. But establishing a common language is knowing what the different types of um, sexual orientation and all those different things, what they mean and what they are, and what to do if what they feel conflicts with my personal beliefs. A lot of times, especially as youth workers, we have a hard time dealing with these things because I don't necessarily agree with your lifestyle. I don't have those beliefs, and I don't want to encourage you because I don't agree with what you think or how you feel. But it is to support someone doesn't mean I have to agree with you. I support your right to feel that way. I support your right to think what you think. I don't believe it and I don't think it, but I support your right to think it because it's your right to think it. And that's the way we have to feel about that. Not going into any kind of religious beliefs or expound on any other kind of moral beliefs, but just in the idea of helping kids deal with their lives. Whatever kind of relationship you might have with them, you can expound differently within that relationship, but overall, just being supportive enough to say you have a right to feel the way you feel, and I support your right to feel that way. So in this slide, I'll gender identity, gender expression, transgender, gender transition, sexuality, sexual orientation, bisexual, pansexual, all those things are different. I'll just quickly go over pansexual is neither male nor female, does not identify with gender, but is open to all sexual experiences between consenting people. Bisexual enjoys both male and female. And sexual orientation is your sexual preference or attraction to others. And sexuality is just one sexual being. So when we talk about those kind of things, we want to be clear when we're understanding what a person is telling us about who they think they are and when we're trying to help them understand it. Gender identity is how one identifies and perceives themselves as it pertains to gender, but their gender expression is how they present themselves externally. It could be totally different than what their gender assignment is. So you have someone born a girl, but they express themselves as a boy. Um, Transgender is an umbrella term for people whose gender identity or expression is different from cultural expectations, but it has nothing to do with sexual orientation. So that means you can have someone who's transgender, but they may not necessarily identify as gay, lesbian, or straight. Doesn't have anything to do with sexual orientation. So I can send this also to anyone who asks, because a lot of times we get these confused and don't understand how to relate to those kids. This is another reason why kids run away from home, because the family doesn't understand what they're going through. They don't like it, they don't want to like it, they don't want to understand it, and you just got to get out. Or because they're made to feel uncomfortable, or just the fear. They haven't even talked about it, they haven't even raised the conversation, and they're afraid of dealing with it, so they leave. And we have to be able to help them navigate through it, but we can't if we don't have a common language to help them, letting them know you're here to listen and you can provide support. So, future planning is just helping them set life goals, a roadmap, and resources, giving them the tools to stay in the game. And this roadmap is a handout that I can send you, but I'm also going to give you the resource to download this book for yourself. Um, and you can have all of these tools. It's a runaway prevention curriculum, and it will go much more in depth about how to help your team. Um, and the next slide is there is hope and help. And the National Runaway Switchboard, there's the number there, 1-800-RUNAWAY, and that is 786-2929. If you go to www.1800runaway.org, you can download this runaway prevention curriculum. And most of what I've said, a lot of what I've said, not all of it, because some of the things, a lot of what I've actually said to you is my own, but most of what's on the slides, everything that's on the slides is in the book. So you can get the gist of that and more in this curriculum. And there's hope and help for youth and teens. This talks about the National Runaway Safe Line. And it says they will listen whether you are thinking of running away or already have. Their services are confidential and non-judgmental and offer support. And the next slide, there is hope and help for parents and guardians. NRS can offer support and help connect you to the right resources for your family and get the information you need, and for prevention and education. If you want to help in your community, explore their resources for educators and youth service providers, including their free runaway prevention curriculum. And that is all. So I thank everyone for listening, and I appreciate your attention.
Well, Cecilia, thank you so much for being willing to do this and to go through the curriculum with us. Just kind of understanding kind of the scope of runaways and the things that actually would cause young people to run away. I think it was very, very helpful. As Cecilia mentioned, she does have resources, and if you're interested in getting those, just um, go ahead and let me know. I think what I'll do is, Cecilia, if you just send those to me, I'll just send them to everyone who was on the webinar. I have everyone's email address now. We can just get that stuff out to them.
Okay.
They have that. And then if you guys are interested in a certificate of attendance, let me know, and I can get that to you as well. But we'll be done for now. Say goodbye before we get kicked off. And thanks so much to everyone. Thank you again, Cecilia.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.